Welcome, everybody. My name is Jacob Sadavoy,
And I'm Michelle Zuby.
and we are honored to have Dr. Megan Miller with us to talk a little bit about like the Do Better movement. So I guess question number one is, how did the Do Better movement begin? Like, kind of, what were some of the things that sparked it, and what are some of the ways that it's evolved over time?
Hi, I'm so excited to be here and thank you for the first question. So the Do Better movement, it's really funny. I get asked that question quite a bit. How did it start? And I've had to do a lot of reflection on it. And to be honest, I looked back, I was creating something and I found a presentation from 2008 where I had a slide and the slide was like my history in the field up to that point. And it was like, where I worked and how I would do better, like how that job or that thing helped me do better. So really, it's been something that I've been practicing, I guess, my whole career. The actual movement, I was in 2017, I was doing a lot of supervision and mentoring of people all around the world. And I kept having like certain themes come up that people kept needing me to train them on, that I was kind of confused as to why they weren't learning about it in graduate school because I had. So I just hoped that everyone would be. And I basically just kind of got sick of being what it felt like a broken record. And right after Christmas of 2017, I remember it was December 26th. I was at my parents' house. I grabbed some paper and I wrote out this whole schedule of like, these are all the things we're going to do in 2018. I have all these webinars I need to make, and every month we'll have a different theme and a different webinar and a different activity. And I'm just going to get this out there to the masses and help everyone learn this content that they're apparently not getting in graduate school. So that's, I guess, what happened. And then it's evolved quite a bit. Initially, it was just me presenting and talking about my little soapbox issues and things that I thought people needed to learn about. And then in 2019 and 2020, it was mostly guest presenters. We were fortunate to have you as one of our guest presenters, Jacob. And we're looking forward to having you again this year with Michelle. And then I think again later in the year too. So I didn't really actually present very much in 2019 or 2020. It was just a lot of back end coordinating who would present and trying to help really take people that I'd met that had expertise, but again, about that dissemination piece. Like I might have seen them present at a conference, but their information wasn't necessarily getting out to everyone. So I wanted to have an opportunity for everyone to learn. I think sometimes in our field, there's like an ivory tower issue where certain folks, especially if they're at universities or whatever, get invited to present the most often and be like the keynote invited presenters that everyone's going to see. And then in the meantime, there's all of these practitioners doing amazing things every day that a lot of times is actually more impactful than what the folks are doing at the universities. That's not to undermine, obviously, universities, but if we're only ever highlighting one aspect of our field, we're missing a whole lot of other things.
100%.
So
And
yeah.
that's why in our book, like kind of we wanted to get people that are in the ivory towers, the ones that are professors that are disseminating in journals. We also wanted to get voices of practitioners because you're right, like kind of they're the ones on the ground doing the work, trying different things. And both of those viewpoints are hugely valuable. And we wanted to showcase that and get other people's perspectives and put it in a book that might be more accessible to some than journals.
Yes. And that's my thing too. So when I was getting my PhD, obviously there's this expectation to try to publish. And I remember I had to write a paper for one of my classes that like part of the requirement was you wrote your paper and submitted it to a journal. And it was such a long process. And I was like, who is even going to read this? Is anyone even going to read this? And it had so much amazing information in it. At least I thought so. And it I didn't even get like, and I knew, because you know how the publishing data is, like I knew it wasn't even going to get accepted or anything, right? But I still had to do it. It didn't get accepted. And I was like, so I spent at least 40 hours of my life on this and no one's ever even going to see it. No, I'll stick to webinars and conference presentations. Thanks. And there's this like assumption that because that's the type of work I do that somehow it's less than people who go through the rigmarole of a publication process, right? Again, both are necessary. We need both, but I don't think the pedestal that certain things get put on is necessarily appropriate. Um, but that's just my opinion on it.
So prior to recording, we were chatting a little bit, and we were saying that you are a champion, and just in the things that you've said, I've now decided to dub you the people's champ, because I really think you are, or the practitioner's champ, maybe is more.
Yeah, probably that.
But really, I mean, that's so important. I think that, and we chatted about this briefly, but I think that there's so many people out there that want to do something, right? They maybe want to do better, but they don't know how. And I think it's really humbling to hear, you just kind of like had this idea, sort of like mulling around, and you're sitting at your parents' house and you just grab some paper and just sketch this thing out, and then here you are. And we shared that with the text, like that's really what we wanted to do, is to just plant seeds for people. Like if you're really passionate about something, go for it, right? Be that champion, in whatever area it is. If it's social justice, if it's about compassion, like whatever it is. What other kind of advice could you maybe give to people out there, those practitioners who aren't sitting in an ivory tower and feel like, it's just not for them, like maybe they're not the right person to do it?
That's an excellent question. Thanks, Michelle. So there, I feel like there's so much advice. We could probably talk for hours, but I'll try to pick just one big piece, because it was an experience that I had recently. So obviously for 2020, a lot of things shifted for people, at the end of May with the murder of George Floyd. And some of us, it was highlighted that some of the folks we knew are living lives that we didn't even realize they were living, and going through things we didn't even realize they were going through. And I had always done the best I could to share and promote the work that various people were doing in social justice around race and things like that. But that wasn't my thing. So I was focused on clinical skills and doing better with those types of things. I did try to make sure to amplify various voices and not just have like the same people presenting and things like that, and have people from different backgrounds and whatnot. But it was never something I really focused on. And then during that time, it became very clear, seeing all of the hurt and difficulties that my friends were going through that I didn't even realize was part of their life. I was like, okay, well, I need to do something here. I don't know what it is, and I don't want to step on anyone's toes, and I don't have expertise in these things. So I started having conversations with people that I had a close enough relationship to talk to about it. And some of them took me to task, and they were like, yeah, you do need to be doing something, and why haven't you been? And you have a platform, and it needs to be used for these types of things too. So I'm still learning. It's a never ending process when you're tackling social justice issues. There are still people who have way more expertise and knowledge than I do, and I'm still amplifying and trying to promote that work as much as I possibly can. And at the same time, especially looking at different activities that we were already doing with Do Better, like the webinars and some of the discussions that we would have on Zoom and things like that, and trying to figure out how we can pull in addressing some of these social justice issues, so that people have a model and have an example of what to do. And I feel kind of odd saying this, but even with, like, I listen to the Beautiful Humans podcast. I love Denisha and Aaron. They're phenomenal. And I still would listen to it and be like, that's just not, but I don't really do those things, right? Like, that's so cool that they do all of that amazing stuff and they give these homework assignments, but like, that's not, I'm over here doing this stuff. So being able to step outside of that comfort zone and try to learn more about, and you'll be uncomfortable, and that's okay. The notion that being uncomfortable is somehow like bad or wrong is not. Like, we can be uncomfortable, it's fine, and we can take things and get feedback that's not necessarily glowing and not be defensive about it. We can be humble and learn and do better from it. So that's been a big one for me this year. So the advice I would give is, even if you look around and you think you're not the person to do it, you can always do something, like we were talking about, Michelle. It's going to be part of our new like tagline or something, but do something and do better. But so you can always do something. And a lot of the times too, people know more than they think they know. So really lean in. Like if you're being asked you to do it, and look at what your abilities are and what you know, so that you can either do it yourself, figure out how to do it, or help tap in someone that does have that expertise. Because I don't want it to sound like I'm saying people can always do anything they're asked to do. Like you obviously have to recognize your boundaries of competence too. But
with having a voice and with stepping out, and potentially being uncomfortable, which I would argue that's where like living is. There is also like kind of within the field, we had also spoken about like kind of criticism, and some of the challenges that we see on social media. And we're lucky to have Ryan O'Donnell talking specifically about social media. But I'd love to get your opinions, just because you have tried to create, or not you've tried, you've created a dialogue. And in creating that, you'll have different opinions be presented. And with different opinions can come arguments. How would you recommend for people who are having social media disagreements? What's the best way, and what are some of the strategies that you have used to diffuse or to learn from challenging conversations?
so the first thing I would say is just don't do it. Don't get into arguments on social media. None of us really have time for that. And what is it actually accomplishing besides potentially harming people? Like, I don't know. It's interesting because if you actually look at my social media activity, my comments and things, you will find very little. There's very little, especially in the last year, of me typing responses to things, because I learned pretty early on that that's just not going, that's a waste of my time. And I'm an efficient person. I don't do things if they're not going to have some sort of impact that I can see right away. So I've shifted. The learning that the arguing wasn't helpful actually happened a few years ago. And so I don't even know if I tried. I think occasionally I get some resurgence and I'll try, and then I'm quickly reminded of why I don't do it. And again, it's not, I don't even try to argue. I just try to like ask some questions, and it goes south so fast. And I'm just like, nope, not doing that anymore. So instead, I'm trying to focus more on having like the live conversations and attending professional development opportunities or reading research on how to have conversations, difficult conversations, conversations with people who disagree or that are in conflict, and how to really buffer that and like work through things. And I'm actually quite surprised at the number of people in our field who dig in and insist that dialogue needs to happen in a certain way. Yet when you ask them if they've read the research on effective dialogue and conflict, they haven't. And they act like it doesn't exist. So my advice really would be to just stop doing that. Don't argue with people online, and learn more about effective dialogue. The other piece of advice was a lesson that I learned actually just this week. As I say, we're constantly learning. So one of, again, I'm not active on social media really, or, in that way on Facebook, but there was an issue that happened with some comments on a post about racism. And there were a few white women who were just like, why are people talking about this? This is behavior analysis. Like, why is this a thing? And in the group that I had initially created, but I'm not part of anymore, the guidance that I created and we have inside the Do Better Collective was to be curious and try not to make people wrong. And we learned, well, I wasn't part of the conversation, but I still learned because I had a conversation with someone afterwards that really ended up going south as well, because the BIPOC individuals that were in the group were getting harmed by all the comments of the white women who were being so like not caring and like questioning why this was even a thing. And there was like a 40 back and forth like comment thread. I wasn't actively watching it. I learned about it after the fact. But what I learned is, again, kind of those offline conversations are still going to be better. So if there's a person that posts something like, to an article about racism if they're like, why do I need to care about this? Instead of trying to engage in public that dialogue with that person, to try to take it offline, see if I can set up a meeting or something like that. Because for two reasons. One, the person that you're trying to dialogue with, even if you ask questions, if they're
Mhm.
saying it, especially in that flippant of a manner, probably not going to shift anything there over like text communication. Two, it just continues to give the opportunity for that person to say things that could potentially be harmful to the marginalized groups that are involved in the conversations. And we obviously don't want to be platforming that. So that was a really big learning opportunity for me, because in the whole time that I've been um, basically since June trying to consume information about calling people in instead of calling them out and being compassionate and humble and those types of things, somehow that never came up as like, what do you do when this is a thing that happens? That was the first time I saw it really like happen and go south. So that was, I think that would be another piece of advice that I would have. Like, if you see something, I'm not saying ignore it completely, but first do some work in developing skill sets around how to have effective dialogue, and then try to connect with that person and do just like we would do with our families and clients and hopefully people you're collaborating with, and develop some type of um, positive interaction to where you can have that conversation with them, whether it's live like this or you might do some private messaging, but don't make it like a public situation.
I love that. And like the idea of like not making someone wrong. I think that's hard, especially when we have strong opinions, especially what's happening in the world, both like kind of racially, but politically as well. And then like kind of with the pandemic on top of all of that, um, we're all pushed to different levels. And that can kind of elicit some of those potentially reactionary responses. So like kind of like that concept of just compassion and being kind, um, and knowing that you don't know their learning history.
Yeah.
So like kind of like coming in, like kind of not proving someone wrong is hugely valuable.
Yes. I actually just thought of one more thing too, going sort of in a different direction. The other thing I would suggest is, whether it's me, which is going to be rare, like I said, or anyone else in the field that you might know their name from presentations or just social media, don't over credit people. So meaning, like, if somebody makes a statement about something, just because of like their reputation or who they are doesn't mean that they're right and other people are wrong, right? So again, you pointed out how there's like conflicting things going on right now in our field, and that's the case for a lot of stuff, like practical functional assessment or
Mm-hmm.
traditional functional analysis, RFT or VB. Like, there's
Mm-hmm.
things like that that come up pretty regularly. So we have to make sure to avoid, like, just because somebody has some sort of really, they're a idol or like a famous person to you, doesn't mean that what they're saying is 100% accurate or the best thing for the field at this time. So really making sure that when you read what people are writing, that you're really reflecting on how that fits, especially with social validity and the true tenets of our science, and then reflect on it for yourself how to take that information in. And it's okay if you find yourself not agreeing with someone. Again, that doesn't mean you need to go argue with them. Go do your own work, figure out what you do think,
Yeah.
and apply it and practice it, and be a humble and compassionate behavior analyst. But I think that happens a lot too, where people just see who certain people are that are saying things, and they're like, well, I'm going to take this side over here, without really doing the work themselves to figure out like why they're thinking the things they're thinking.
Oh, fantastic.
That's such an important message, I think, both inside the field and out, right? Because as humans, we want to align ourselves, we want to feel connected, and I think that's it's great. We need each other, for survival and a whole bunch of other things. But at the same time, sometimes I think we can overstep that alignment. Kind of like what you were just saying, like this person, I idolize them, and I look to them for how I should conduct myself, or what I should be doing, and it's not always the most practical, it's not always the most socially valid for you, and I think that's something, again, we're not really taught. It's a lot of hero worship, And this is the way that it is because this is, we said it is, or so and so said it is. And I think as scientists, we always need to, no matter what it is, have that philosophic doubt. And I think that's something that a lot of people kind of forget. And as you were talking, I was like, yep, that's what it is. It's maintaining that philosophic doubt, no matter who's saying it. And it's so empowering at the same time, right? Because then we don't have to feel like it's not us, like we're not capable, that we still have some of that. I hate to say the words like power or control, but like, we're not just saying, we're not sheep, we're not just following, we're really being, scientists, and looking at it, from all angles. So I appreciate that so much.
Thanks, Michelle.
This is a little bit longer than some of our other interviews, but I do want to.
You're talking to me, so.
Thank you. I do want to kind of touch on kind of the what you have created, this community, this ability for behavior analysts to interact with the autistic population, and really making the efforts to shape behavior so allistic and autistic people can have a conversation about ABA. Prior to what you've created, what I feel was transpiring was you had some individuals in the autistic community criticize ABA and tell ABA practitioners that ABA caused trauma. And the responses that I was seeing was that that's inaccurate and that they're wrong. And I feel over time we have learned to be a little bit more compassionate, to learn to listen. And I really feel a huge amount of gratitude towards what the Do Better Collective has created in helping shape behavior of behavior analysts so that we can kind of move closer to the autism population, and listen to kind of critiques on our field, which we haven't been really good at, to be completely honest, but is essential in order for us to evolve. And if we're not evolving, then we're not really a science. So I'd love to thank you for that, but also talk about the shaping procedure in a way, and kind of what you hope to create in, I don't know, the next maybe hopefully months, years.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that, Jacob. Thank you. I will say, so some people act like this is something that was recently important to me, but this one really has been since I started in this field as just not even knowing what BCBA was, just an in-home therapist in Ohio. I had the utmost respect for my clients, and we were constantly looking at things as much as we could from their perspective and brainstorming how. And the times where I wasn't permitted to do that, or I wasn't allowed to do that, is really what fueled a lot of the do better, type activities that we do, and the don't make those same mistakes that we did back then. So this has always been an area that has been a high priority for me. What has shifted, though, is that opportunity to really dialogue and engage, because in previous years, whenever there was criticisms about ABA, if I would try to understand those, I didn't have anyone that I could actually make any dialogue with, because as soon as they would find out I was a BCBA, they just would bash me and didn't want to talk to me. Understandably, that's fine. But so it really did take, some people, and there's, some Facebook groups and pages that have been created by those folks. So I want to make sure that we're recognizing them as well, who were willing themselves to engage us and not just dismiss and think that the whole field's messed up and is never going to change. Right. So we needed that first, because without that, I don't think we could have done anything. And they've done so much work in getting, especially on Facebook, some people to start to rethink how they're doing things. What I realized was that you hit a roadblock at some point, because the people who are on the cusp and ready for the change, some of those the different comments and things that they would read are going to hit for them, and that's great. But all the people that need to also be pulled in and shaped and moved along, you're just reading stuff. You're not going to get through those defensive reactions and things like that. And you're not going to develop the compassionate responding that's needed. So that's where we really, for more towards like the end of 2020, I started creating more content around being compassionate and humble, and what is the operational definition, what's the task analysis, how do we do these things.
Mm-hmm.
And so for most of this year, the things that I'll be putting out are going to focus a lot on that. We are trying to have presenters that we're featuring that focus on those types of things as well. With how far behind our field is on these skills, I think it's going to last for quite some time. But it's so comforting, even just over the past few weeks, I've been getting emails or private messages of people saying, I've been wanting to act like this, and I've been wanting to do more of what you're talking about, but it was never modeled for me. I never saw it. I felt like that's not how we're allowed to be as behavior analysts. And like, you've given me permission to act like that, which totally goes against what I said earlier about like, don't just blindly believe people. But it was still very encouraging that, there actually are a lot of people who want to engage in more positive ways, but they just haven't felt like they had permission to do so.
Well, it probably didn't feel right. Like they're engaging and it's like,
so
I'm being
sad.
taught to do this way, but like kind of this doesn't sit well with me. And then now they have this, they're shown a different way that's more aligned with their values. And that like you opened up something for them, which is incredible, which is again, like kind of something that I've experienced. I do want to acknowledge Joy Johnson, who is on the autism spectrum, who I've had a conversation with in a back and forth, and like kind of have learned so much. And I'm wholly grateful because she's changed who I am as a practitioner from those conversations.
Yes, Joy. I haven't had the pleasure of talking to her yet. Have you all heard of the Clubhouse app?
I haven't, no.
We'll have to talk about that offline, but she's on there, and anytime I see that she's in a room, I'm like, I need to go listen to what Joy has to say right now. And I've watched, she's done a few different continuing education events, and I've attended those, and she has such great insight and true pleasure to learn from.
There was such a key word right there. You said listening. And that's something that's also come up in a lot of these talks. It's we have to listen, because we're never going to get a seat at the table, whatever table that is. If we want to collaborate and be on multidisciplinary teams and work in other capacities and really evolve the science, we have to listen. And not, and we could go on about this for hours, but, we always come in sort of as the cleanup committee. That's also been like another theme. So you don't have to necessarily listen to anybody because we're there to fix the problem. But we're really not these larger systemic problems. That's not what we're being, that's not the call to action, right? We just want to be part of it. We want to take what we have, the science, and offer it in a way to be part of a team, to be part of the solution. I don't think anybody's looking to us to just say, hey, where are all those BCBAs?
Yeah.
One day, Michelle.
We all just come in our like, a little nerd attire, carrying Cooper. But it's that active, compassionate listening and that perspective taking that is going to take us to those places that we need to go.
Yeah. And we are often trained to do the exact opposite. So we're working against a lot here.
Yep.
So we need to wrap up because like this is so much longer than our other interviews, but thank you. What is the future for you for Do Better? What do you envision? You shared a little bit about what the calendar year, what you have on, but just like kind of other things that you like kind of really want to create with this platform that you have built.
So definitely right now, our big focus is on building the membership community. So we have the Do Better Collective is a membership community, basically to replace the time I was wasting on Facebook and really help people connect more with like-minded professionals. So we'll continue to be doing like a lot of professional development, but also in each of the different groups in there, having action-oriented conversations and checking and holding each other accountable for making those changes. And my business partner, Jen, and I have a lot of like different things that we brainstorm all the time. But one of the things that we talked about last year and we just haven't really had a chance, we have the outline and everything, we just need to get it moving, is creating a do better certification. We often are asked, how do people differentiate between certain, types of practitioners, and the ones who are focused on being compassionate, person-centered, client, focusing on their client, and have, put in the time and effort to really develop skill sets around that. So that's hopefully something that will be coming by the end of 2021. But so that would be like the big project. And then there's just all the time content that I want to create and put out there. It's just finding enough time in the day to do it.
Fantastic, because it's not in course sequences. So where are people going? If a practitioner is interested in becoming more compassionate, where is that?
Right.
And like kind of, it's fantastic that I hope that that happens. I also, Sex ABA is tomorrow, or it's right now.
It's happening right now. I'm getting all these like text messages about it. I'm like, okay. I'm in a meeting.
And is it going to be on? It's on your platform, correct?
So yeah, so that's a thing we're toying around with. So Sex ABA is the first one. We partnered up to see, because we do have this platform, is this something that we could help host, and then behavior analysts don't have to like pay a ton of money for all these other online things that exist.
Fantastic.
So,
and is it going to be available after? Like, kind of, we're not going to be airing this. We're going to be airing it probably beginning of April-ish.
Yeah, this one. So the Sex ABA was, you had to pre-register, but there are events that we're planning that will have a recorded component. So right now, I don't know if Sarah mentioned this when you interviewed with her, but Sarah Troutman with her Defy community, and then with Do Better, we're collabing, and we're going to have something hopefully at the end of April. And we'll do the same type of thing using our platform to host the online conference.
Amazing. Again, like kind of the things that you're creating and building just to like kind of allow opportunities for a behavior analyst just to like kind of like expand their competence and learn. It's fantastic. It's definitely needed. And thank you for being the practitioner champion.
I do have to say, I know we need to close out, but for all that, none of it would be possible if it wasn't for our web developer, Adam Magoo. So I have to give like,
thank you, Adam.
He's always like, I have the ideas or whatever, and he's like, well, these are all the things we need in order to do that. So if it weren't for him, none of this stuff could happen.
That's amazing.
Web champion.
Yeah, he's our web champion.
Everyone's a champ today.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah, this is fantastic.
It was wonderful talking to you too.